Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with Ayse Fennelly, who's the creator of Charlie's London. How you doing?
Hello. I'm good. How about you?
I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh no, that's fine. That's not a problem at all.
Do you remember that we talked a few times on Twitter?
Oh yeah. I do you know what? I've been because I've been quite absent with streaming and stuff. I've had so many people like reach out to me going, "Oh, when are you going to come back on streams? We miss having you around." And I keep track of like everybody pretty much that I talk
Oh,
talk to in DMs because at the end of the day, it's so important to talk to people and reach out to people. So yeah, I like many others. I remember the conversations we have.
oh, good, good, good. Oh, because you were always so pleasant. I remember seeing you on Ethan Van Sciver's streams a few times, and
Hmm.
and I was like, you were so nice. I was like, I got to get this. I got to get your comic because I wanted to support it. And then I reached out to you a few times. I'm glad you remembered me. Thank you. That made my day.
Oh no, that's no problem. It's really funny. Like when you've been on one of the bigger shows and then you reply to a DM to somebody, you do. It's weird when the minute you sort of start going on the bigger show, so to speak, you end up. People think that they can't DM you. People think that they can't message you, and you like won't reply. I reply to everybody,
Yes,
and
you were very nice.
and yeah, and they're like, "Oh, you replied." I'm like, "Well, yeah," because it's funny because you end up almost living a double life when you do something like this because it literally feels like Clark Kent. One minute you're by day you're this, by
Well, I
night
got
you're
my
something
Superman
else.
smuggy on, so yeah.
Yeah, literally for me, it is by day I'm someone, by night I'm someone else. Because if I stream with anyone in the US, I'm not predominantly streaming at night because of the time difference. So I am literally someone else at night time, which is quite funny.
Oh, it's funny that you said that because I just started doing these live chats. I forget if you're my sixth or my seventh, and I've been having so much fun. So my friend Pete started me doing this, and I
Mm.
said, I'm gonna email everybody, see who replies. So I'm not gonna spoil it with some of the people, but I'm just like I don't care how big they are, how small they are. What are they gonna do? Say no? you know,
Mhm.
I, People say no to me all the time. I'm used to it.
Well, I think this is another thing. The minute you start going on bigger shows, people automatically think you won't come on a smaller channel. And I've never ever had that attitude at all. I'll go on a channel if there's 1,000 people watching. I'll go on a channel if there's one person watching. Because at the end of the day, you could reach out to that one person and make so much difference to either their journey doing comics or just their journey being in any crowdfunding community or any comic community or whatever the situation is, or even just reaching out to someone on Twitter. Or you could be on, I've been on big shows where I haven't sold a single book. I've been on small shows where there's been 5 people watching, and every one of those 5 people in the chat have bought a book. So you should never judge just because it's a small amount of people watching that
Oh,
it's not
don't worry,
making
there'll
an
be
impact.
small amount of people watching me. Well, so let's start at the beginning then. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's pretend. So who are you?
Well, I am when I'm not writing a comic book about Charlie Chaplin. I'm a history teacher at secondary school, which is like 11 to 18-year-olds over
Okay,
here. What else do I do? So I do a lot of research. A lot of stuff I do is actually on it's either Chaplin or is predominantly on the First World War.
yes,
Which,
I've been watching you post that. That is so interesting to me.
yeah, I mean it's just that it's an insane journey, and I go around all sorts of different places, and then there's all different other periods of history that I love, and I love the other thing that I'm mad about is English football. So
Oh, okay.
like soccer to you guys.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, I just yeah, that's about it really. I suppose apart from the
Now,
obvious, which is the comic.
your grandfather was a World War I veteran, or
My great
great
grandfather, yeah.
grandfather. Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. I saw you posted pictures of him. You know, I, I,
Mm.
I'm very patriotic to my country, and it's good to see you're patriotic to your country. I think everybody, dance with the one that brought you is the way I feel.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
mean, I think for me, I've always had that sense of patriotism, but in a very dual way, because my dad is Turkish and my mum is English.
Right.
And but my dad's side of the family, my grandfather hated the fact that Turkey wasn't fighting the Nazis and took a boat to Egypt and signed up to fight for the English.
Oh wow. That's
So when, like, my father's from Cyprus, so when the war broke out in Cyprus it started really underground in the 50s, but when it really came to a head in 74, I think it was, my granddad was able to take my aunts and uncles and my nan and bring them over to here because he had an English passport. So God knows what would have happened to them if they didn't have an English passport. So it's really interesting because at the moment we've got this big thing going on in the UK. We've got like an immigration crisis. A lot of people coming from Europe trying to get into the UK. And people are always really keen to find out my opinion on it, because while I'm very patriotic, I'm a second generation immigrant. But at the same time, my granddad had to fight in a war to get here. So I'm very much, if you've got something to contribute to a country and you've got a strong connection with them, whatever it will be, that there was no reason that you can't be in a country that you want to claim is like your second home. But I
I'm
know
very
that the same
different.
sort of thing is
American.
happening in America as well.
All my grandparents were born in Europe. My father's parents were born in Italy, and my mother's parents were born in Ireland. So America. But I consider myself American. When people always say, "What are you?" I'm like, "I'm American." I can't speak Italian. If you put me in Dublin, I would get lost.
Yeah, well, I always consider I'm British, and I'm proud of being British. I mean, I'm very proud of the the strong sort of cultural things that my father has taught me from being from Cyprus. But at the same time, my dad is the first person to say that when he moved to this country and he married an English woman, there were many things about his culture that he wasn't going to impose on me because I was brought up in England.
Yes.
And he's very, very much like that. I'm very lucky because people think, oh, there's all these images get conjured up when you say you've got a father that's Muslim. And my dad is not your what people would consider to be stereotypical Muslim at all. So, and my mum's actually Farsi Jewish descent.
Oh, okay.
So it's really, my brother and I were having this conversation the other day, because the Jewish line runs through the female side traditionally.
Right.
Um, Technically, because Islam predominantly runs through the male, technically my brother, my full-blooded brother, is Muslim and I am Jewish,
Oh, that's interesting.
which is mad. But
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons why I think that I'm so sort of interested in this idea of nationality, but not from a nationalistic point of view, from the point of view of what makes somebody feel connected to something. So, when I never knew anything about my great grandfather that died in the First World War until 2 years ago. So when I found out about him and I went over and I found where he was buried, the first thing I was thinking to myself was, I'm so glad he's got somewhere where he's buried, because actually so many of these soldiers don't have graves, they
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
memorials. And then the second thing, the wave that sort of came over me was, um, I can't believe that he's been here for over 100 years and no one knew he was here. And it was just so sad for me that
That is.
somebody that had died for their country was laying in the ground. No one had ever visited him. And so there's a group called who look after all the cemeteries, called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and I do post a lot about them as well. Like, I'll retweet their stuff, and they are a non-profit organisation they get government funding, but essentially it's private donations and volunteers and charity that keeps them going. But they're the ones that look after the thousands of cemeteries around the world that you see that've got the white headstones. So the minute I got back to the UK after seeing him, I signed up to volunteer with them. So I do guest speaking for them.
Oh, that's good.
So I go around to, like, local history clubs or schools or those sorts of things and talk about the work that they do. Because I was so, I just felt in my heart that they'd looked after him for over 100 years. It was my job to give something
Oh,
back.
that's nice. What a coincidence! Because my wife, who by the way talked to you a few times too, I'll get back to that, but she just joined a group where they take over. They maybe it's the same group because it's international, but they repair and restore tombs and not tombs, gravestones in graveyards. That they'll go to a graveyard and they'll find places that are in disrepair. And they're a nonprofit. They go around. So I wonder if it's the same organization. What a
They may have connections, but these ones specifically look after the military headstones of the Commonwealth.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
they will.
these are like Civil War and Revolutionary War soldiers in America. So it's probably inspired or whatever tangentially connected to them, but it's the same thing. I guess there's patriotic people that fill this need in every country.
Well, they may have. The interesting thing actually is that when I think it was 1915, there was a law passed that said that none of these soldiers would be brought home, that where they would be buried where they fell, which a lot of families didn't like.
Oh yeah,
Um, but interestingly, the cemetery that my grandfather's buried in, there's a plot there now that's empty where there was graves, and now they've covered it up, and you can see that it's just been covered with new earth. And I did ask someone why, and they said that recently the Americans had been exhumed and they'd been repatriated,
oh okay,
because even though they were buried in British cemeteries, there was a big thing that went through Congress where even though they were allies, or you were allies, you weren't part of the Commonwealth. So therefore, you shouldn't have been buried alongside Commonwealth soldiers because there was no law in your country that you couldn't be repatriated. So if there were still family members alive that wanted their relatives brought home,
okay.
they've been repatriating them, which means the group that you're talking to me about, they could have a connection with that.
Now I got to ask more details. I'm a typical husband. I was listening at her during dinner.
You got to listen. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. You listen to it. That's the.
So let's talk. I'm gonna put the camera on your comics. I got your comics right over here. So let's talk
Mhm.
about your comics, because I could talk to you about so many different things, and I want to make sure that people see your comics. So here we go. I got 3 copies. I got this cover.
Mhm.
I love this cover. I think that's my favorite. I got so much glare. I got this cover,
Mhm.
and I got this cover.
Yep.
And
You
I also got 2 like smaller books that I forgot where I put them.
you so
that
you would have got the silent variant, and
correct.
then there was another book which was the spin-off story of Charlie and Stan Laurel. I think
Yes,
that's the
yes,
one you're
yes,
talking
yes,
about.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I love I used to watch growing up with my dad. It seemed like after church on Sundays, it was like old movie time. So we would watch Groucho Marx, Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin. So I've watched most of his films, but it was kind of like something I just did with my dad. So I'm very what's the word, nostalgic whenever I see Charlie Chaplin. So when you started announcing these comics, I was like, you seemed nice. I wanted to support crowdfunding, and then I was like, you know what, this is, my dad had just passed, so I was like, this is like all perfect timing. So, I really enjoyed it. I
Mm.
really. I also wanted to say, when I was also a school teacher, and I was teaching out in New Mexico, and they had a Charlie Chaplin society, and once or twice a year they would put on a concert and they would play old Charlie Chaplin films with
Mhm.
the full orchestra.
Yeah.
Like it used to be, and I went to that like 2 or 3 times. It was amazing. So to see them in an old movie house with the full pit orchestra, that was a lot of fun.
It's the best way to see them. I mean, it's not always so easy, but there is nothing like watching one of those films with a live orchestra.
Oh,
This year, when I go to something every year in Bristol called the Slapstick Festival,
okay,
and this year I actually went and showcased the book, and I was doing a talk on the book there, and they weren't showing any. They didn't show any Chaplin this year for their big ones, because they have it on a rotation. They either have Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, or Chaplin. But if they don't have the big filmers like a Chaplin, they'll have like other little shorts, whatever. But I
Okay.
have been. What was it that we saw? We saw Sherlock Junior, the Buster Keaton, and Safety Last, the Harold Lloyd. And I have to say that even them, I mean, I still like them, but they're not my favourite, obviously. When they are with a live orchestra, they're still incredible. I
Yeah,
mean, I
it's
think
a lot of fun.
the best one I actually saw was they played the Kid there a couple of years ago, and I know the music so well. And when you first hear it, sort of the orchestra start up, it is pretty incredible.
Yeah, a lot. So, my viewers probably don't know, but you were endorsed by the Charlie Chaplin estate. So this isn't
Hmm.
just some fan fiction. This is
Nope.
official comic book.
Yep.
Yeah, that is
Yep.
so cool. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, the thing is, people have asked me how would they get involved in doing it, and I'm very honest in saying I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know is because I couldn't say to someone with my hand on my heart, "Oh, you could do this, you could do that," and they'll definitely give you. Because the thing is, I've actually worked with them for nearly 15 years now,
Okay.
so doing different things. So I totally understand that it is a lot easier for me to get into a position like this than it would be for somebody on the outside, because they know me and trust me and know the vision I wanted to create was not one that would be a detriment to his legacy.
Right.
But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I did have to start somewhere. So back when I was just blogging about his connection with South London, which is also where I'm from, and how so many of the places in London, they do still exist, but you have to know where to look, were inspirational for his films. I got talking to his biographer, a man called David Robinson,
Okay.
and David actually knew he knew Chaplin, so
Oh
we
wow.
had these really interesting conversations, and he would say to me that because of where you're from, he once said to me, forget about the fact that his films were an inspiration, where he grew up was an inspiration for his films. Where you grew up allows you to understand him in ways that other people don't, because there is a geographical way of looking at the way that he saw things.
Okay.
And I never really thought about that, but it got me sort of very interested in looking at not there's no family connection between us, as in we're not related or anything like that, but just the fact that there are a lot of things that um, tie us both to the same area. The fact that his my great great uncle was in the same workhouse that he was, like a boys' orphanage,
Oh.
um, and that there were, so many different places that he used to walk and knew, that I grew up and knew, and my family. And it was weird because I got to know so much more about my sort of English side of the family, predominantly my mum's side of that part of the family, than um, through his films and through his experiences growing up.
Oh. Okay.
So it was just little things that opened up conversations, and also the idea of, I never really understood why every Christmas we'd have the Gold Rush on, or like why there was always a Chaplin film on, and it was because there was this deep sense of pride that this person had come from the same place.
Okay.
So I got doing all of that, and then I'd always had this idea that there are two definitive books on Chaplin. There are his book, which is called My Autobiography, and there is David Robinson's book. But David Robinson's book is like a doorstop. It's huge, and it's totally and utterly, it is the book to read. And
Okay.
I remember thinking, I wish there was some way that we could make these books more accessible to a new generation wanting to come in and enjoying these films, a new
Yes.
generation that understanding his life and his art, and equally just in be engaging to even people that love it, maybe people that love his films but really don't have the attention capacity to read a massive long book, because at the end of the day, the most intelligent people in the world are not necessarily the most well read, because they can't concentrate on reading something for that length of time. And you know as well as I do, you've been an educator, there are kids that will not read a whole big book because
Oh
their
no.
brains can't do it. It's not they don't want to.
You know, you're absolutely right. I've told this story a few times on my channel that I associated reading with to schoolwork. You know,
Mhm.
like to me as a kid, it was inconceivable to go home and read. Just like I'm not going to go home and do math. That was a school activity. It wasn't until friends gave me comic books that I realized reading is a fun, pleasurable thing, and I've never stopped reading since. I went from the bottom reading group. I always joke around that we used to meet in the boiler room in the basement until to the top reading group in 1 year. The year I discovered comic books. So you're absolutely 100% right. You get people, you know, I read this. I want to learn more about Stan Laurel. Believe it or not, I never realized that he was an important person. He was always the other guy in Laurel and Hardy. You know, so
What
you got me interested.
the reason I wanted
Pardon
to
me.
tell that story about Chaplin and Stan Laurel was because when you got to the end of that book, or at least I hope this is how it was intended because it was how I wrote it. When you got to the end of that book, you realised that Stan Laurel always wanted to be part of a double act, and Chaplin always wanted to be a standalone comic.
Okay.
Because if Stan Laurel had had his way, his straight man would have been Chaplin.
Oh wow, how different would that have been?
I mean, it was just, and actually, one thing that Statistical Zero, who's a very good friend of mine, he was going through the book on his channel the other day, and the one thing he said that I was so happy about was he said that there is a danger when you write books like this to um try to see everything through rose tinted spectacles and not be honest, leave
Okay.
out the flaws. And he actually said on there, you didn't do any of that. He said she didn't do any of that. She showed him when he was a total like a-hole. She
Yeah.
showed him. And I think one of the places that I think that he really wasn't very nice and he was a real like so and so was when he turned down the part for when he turned down the part for Incarno with that Stan Laurel ended up taking up, and then when he saw that Stan Laurel was making it a much better part than he did, and how the crowd were
Yeah.
applauding him,
He wanted it back.
he wanted it back, and because he was the biggest star, Kano gave it back to him. And
Yeah.
Stan Laurel, bless his heart, was like, years later, he would tell the story that once I was Charlie Chaplin's understudy,
Oh,
and
that's so nice.
he used to tell it like it was never anything with a disgruntled feeling. And he was um, when Chaplin was extradited from America, he wrote to him and said he couldn't believe what was happening to him, and all these. So there was never any animosity between them.
Oh,
But,
that's great.
but I
I
thought that
remember
was
reading that, going, "Oh man, what a jerk."
yeah, and this is the thing. I didn't want people to think that I was fangirling over him. He did some really, in times, quite horrific things. But I don't think he realised what he was
Well,
doing was
thank
so.
God you don't know everything about me.
Yeah, but I don't think he actually realised what he was doing was that bad. He suffered with severe bouts of depression, which a lot of
Yeah.
comedians do,
Yeah.
and I think that he was incredibly complex. He had he had the severe hang-ups of what had happened with his mum and his dad. I think he was plagued by the worry of having some form of psychosis like his mother. He was petrified of becoming an alcoholic like his father, so he was teetotal his whole life. And
Yeah.
I think that there were these. His art form was the only way that he could be who he was, and it's like Paulette Goddard. They got divorced not because she stopped loving him or he stopped loving her, but she couldn't come between him and his work. It was like having a third person in the marriage, and
Right.
she couldn't deal with it. And the problem was as well because the tide was starting to turn on him at that time, and her movie career was on the up. After The Great Dictator, there really started to become like a sort of a divide between them because he how can I put this? she went for some quite big roles, but because she was in a relationship with him and there was all this stuff swirling around about the communism allegations, she lost quite a few big parts. One of the biggest parts that she auditioned for, and she was in the running until he went to a dinner and he gave a speech, and the press didn't like the way that they thought he was being soft on Russia. Was Gone with the Wind. She
Oh
lost
wow, I
she
didn't know that.
lost the part of Gone with the Wind because of her association with him, or that's what she blamed it on. So there's quite a lot of things that are very quite sad, quite telling.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, your artist. Did you know your artist? Did you shop around? Did you find somebody like, you know? Because everything came out so well, so perfect. Even the binding. My thing lately has been the binding on comics. You know, everything came out. Did you go through hell with this? I don't know if you saw, but I just spoke with Martina Marcota, and she went through hell getting her comic out. You know, your first comic, I guess, is a big learning curve. So, let's talk a little bit about the comic itself coming out.
Well, everyone always comments to me how professional this book looks.
Yes, that's what I was saying. I don't know. I'm a little bit starstruck.
Oh, that's right. So what I think, the reason I tell people over and over again this book looks the way it does is for a number of reasons. But just to break it down briefly, the first thing is you cannot come into CG or into any crowdfunding community and within the first 6 months think you're going to bring out a book and everything is going to be
Oh
perfect.
no,
Right.
I know that. I'm not that naive.
Oh, no, I don't, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying I've had this conversation with so many people, and you know what? You have this conversation with people, and they don't necessarily like what you're telling them
Right.
because they think that, they see the bigger campaigns, and I've done very well, and I've no doubt about that, and I'm humble to everybody that's bought my book. But they see the bigger campaigns and they think, oh, how hard can it be? Listen, I've not got the numbers to fulfill that like Ethan's got, Shane's got,
Yeah.
and John's got, all these other people that have been around doing this for a long time. I don't have the numbers to fulfill that they did. But I can tell you now, you have to take into account that is going to be a massive part of it. The crowdfunding part is the easy part. The sitting on the streams and actually promoting it, it's taxing, it's enjoyable, but that's still not the hardest part. The hardest part is the graph that comes afterwards, making sure your color palettes are right before you send them to the printers,
And
making
did
sure
you know any of that before you started this?
none
Oh,
of this at all. And that's why I say you have to be around for a while, and every live stream you watch that has anyone giving any opinions on books, or like John Mayland does his Comicsgate Presents, where he actually he goes through the books and stuff, and he has campaigns on, and he does ask actually some quite trying questions about this, that, and the other. Listen to them.
okay.
Sit there with a notepad, go through what they go. If they're telling you about weights of books are so important. I didn't
Yeah.
know any of this on my first one. Don't try to make it some,
Yeah. This is a heavy book,
yeah, and I'll tell you what,
and shipping probably went up from the day one of your crowdfunding to the day you actually shipped.
it did. We lost money on shipping.
I bet you did. Oh,
We did. And little things like when I was announcing this stretch goal, I'm going to add this, and this stretch goal, I do not deprive any of my backers anything. But the one thing I'll say to anyone going down that road, make sure you check your costing, because one tiny little thing that you have to add
yes.
into that package that you've promised to all your backers, so there's no way that you could not give it to them, could send you from one price bracket to another price bracket in postage, and you could end up in a deficit. And this
Yeah.
is all the little things that people have to take into account. You have to take into account that most people don't have the financial capacity to have all the book finished before they go to crowdfund. That's how the world is. You've got to have a minimum of 5 pages because that's what is the
Yeah. You got to
standard.
show off something.
Yeah. So when you think about that, you've got to think to yourself, okay, how am I going to pay the artist? Artist page rates. What is their page rate? How am I going to factor this in? These are all things that somebody you know, me, I was very naive when I came into it. So I sat and I listened and I made notes and I took from all of that stuff what I was going to be able to do. And there is so much that I did on the first one I'm not going to do on the second one. Like there's
Yeah.
so many things that
Oh
I
yes,
have
I can't wait for
learned.
the
Mm.
you know. Oh, so Mickey, your artist, did you
Yeah.
know him beforehand, or did you discover him?
No, I did score. So basically, originally, Carl Stefan was my choice to draw the comic, who
Okay,
the creator of Mary Boys and who did one of the covers. But he was working on Mary Boys, but he said to me, I have a friend I used to work with who I think would be perfect for this. So I said, oh, brilliant. So anyway, he put me in touch with Mickey, and Mickey is phenomenal. I
yes,
mean,
good.
he caught everything. And what I liked about him was he seems to be able to just get in my head and actually everything I'm thinking that I want these pages to turn out like, he is able to get them down. He does his own research. He tells me quite openly, I sit there watching Chaplin films while I'm drawing these pages, or I've bought myself a book on Chaplin, and I've gone and I've actually read a little bit about him so I can get inside his head, so when I can understand a bit more
Okay,
your script. So he's very much invested, and it's just been absolutely brilliant working with him. He's obviously back for the second one.
oh good, cool.
Yeah, we've kept the consistency of that, and the it's really, really good that I've been able to keep that because I can't imagine anyone else drawing it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's comic book people are like that. I want to see the same art team on the second book. It's just the way comic book people are. That's good to know that he's coming back, and it's good that you work together. Did you give him full scripts, like every panel described, or was he just able to, like, you know read you, like you said, read your mind?
No, I gave him full scripts because
Okay.
the thing is that the chaplains had to okay every part of the script, which they did.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. So,
Yeah, they had
so you
to
have a
okay.
third party scrutinizing everything.
Well, do you know what? They're pretty good. I mean, I have to say they are very, very good. I mean, the night that I never forget this. The night that I launched book one, one of my friends, Mark, call me Mark, um, he messaged me and went, "Oh my god, have you seen what's trending on Twitter?" I went, "No." And what was trending on Twitter was Charlie Chaplin is a paedophile. Don't know,
Oh,
I don't know why it was trending on Twitter. So I was like, "Oh, for God's sake, no, he wasn't." I mean, and I had this blooming conversation with people all the time. Like they
was,
read
was this right before your comic was coming out?
this was the day I launched.
Oh my God.
Well, I was
Oh
like,
God.
"Oh, for God's sake!"
That's all you need. That's
Yeah,
all you
so I was literally like, okay, so I messaged the chaplains because they follow me on Twitter and I speak to them a lot. And I said to them, how am I going to handle this, especially with the fact that, part of the book does the first book, as you know, covered his marriage to Mildred Harris when she was only 16. And they replied with, I said, you know what? This happens all the time. They went, this stuff comes and goes, it ebbs and flows. We just ignore it. So whatever you get thrown at you on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, ignore it because you've got our full backing. So we're not worried. So
need.
I was like, okay, cool. So I didn't particularly concern myself with it, but they're very, very good.
it,
I
it,
mean,
it seems like all this Twitter stuff is. I think the best thing to do is ignore it. These people just seem like they're like, I can't even, like, oh, a flashing light. Let's yell about this. Oh, another flashing light. Let's yell about that. I don't know.
yeah, I think
Twitter's
it's
fun because I
definitely
get to talk to people like you, but it's also horrible because it seems like mentally unstable people are just yelling and screaming.
it is. It is. It's the fact of it, and it's I was just going back to the point we were talking about before about the crowdfunding and getting the books out and like how professional it looks. It wouldn't be without Twitter and without the community that we find ourselves in that I wouldn't have known all of how to do this stuff. Like people that I can reach out to and ask them what printers do they use, or
Yes, and everybody's been helpful to you, right?
everyone's been helpful. I
Yeah,
mean, I haven't had everybody has given me. I mean, from the very, if you want to say the top echelons to like the ordinary people like you and me, all sorts of bits of advice have come my way. Like I'll never forget. I mean, Peter Gilmore. He's actually the one that he's my quick fix man, as I call him. I literally, if I can't think of anything or something can't work or I need something done really quickly, I can message him, and within a couple of days maximum,
Okay.
he's, like things like he was able to align all of the pages so that when I sent them to Mixam, everything was aligned properly and all the spine was the way it should be, and he designed the logo that came on the boxes, and you know
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a comic that came out by a company that's been in business for 20 years. This, I'm showing the spine right now. I think it's, because I've seen some crowdfund comics. You get them and you're just like, ooh, I paid $20 for this, but this is a good
Well,
good.
that's another thing that, is I cannot stress enough to anybody. Buy a proof. When you've done your book, spend the $20, £20, get your proof copy. Make sure it's
Oh,
fine. Because at the end of the day, if you don't get that in your hands, I went through my script with a fine tooth comb. I got my print copy, I looked at it and found a spelling mistake because it was a
oh,
physical copy in my hand. So I was able to go back, I was able to rectify the print file, and I was able to send it to print. If that had gone to print and
yeah,
hundreds of people had got that and it had a spelling mistake, I would have been mortified.
right.
So
All the
that
people that didn't buy your comic would be making fun of you.
Well, this is exactly how it goes. So
Yeah.
and you know what? I knew that because this was a fishy licensed product, because there had
Yep.
been a lot of
You got
eyes
more
on the campaign.
responsibility than the average bear. Yeah.
Yeah, and because of, there was so much happened with this book. Like the first one launched on Ethan's channel. It had a massive opening night. There was a lot of conversation when it was coming out. The fact that people were like, why has she released this in CG? Well, it's quite obvious why I released this in CG. I released this in CG because Chaplin was the epitome of cancel culture. Like the amount of times they tried to cancel him and they couldn't. Even the FBI and CIA couldn't cancel him. So I'm when I say that there's no better example of fear and government involvement going mad, then there's so much that can be learned from his story. Did he bring a lot of it on himself? Of course he did. There's no doubt that he brought a lot of that on himself. But at the same time, he's a great case study for the Cold War. He's a
Okay.
great case study in how one person can almost be, elevated and then vilified in the space of 20 years, not only because of their own behaviours, but because of what is going on socially and politically, the
That's
climate
a
of what is going on
good
in the
point.
world.
I never thought. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
So it was
That-
it was the perfect place to launch the book. And
So
I
let
had a load of people before I launched. There was a load of backlash from just people that aren't even worth mentioning now that were like, "What are you releasing a book about him for? No one will want to read it." And I was like, "Well, that's not
oh,
the feedback I'm getting, to be honest with you." So and I've had the same, the typical stuff that you get thrown at you when you've been on one of those bigger channels of you've only made that money because everybody's bought it that likes the host of the show and all this stuff. But it was another reason why I was like, you know what, when you get your hands on this book and you're going to see the quality of it, you're all going to be eating your words, because this book is not going to be anything subpar. It is going to be exactly what it's
yeah,
promised, and it is.
it is. It's a good job. I you know, I'm a mainstream comic book guy who's turned away from the mainstream lately. So I'm really appreciating buying stuff that I never would have bought 5, 6 years ago, like a comic book by Charlie Chaplin. Where's the cape? Where's the laser beams? But I'm really enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Well,
I,
I sent the script for the next one to the Chaplins. What was it? 7, 8 months ago now. So the first book, they wanted it chapter by chapter, but the amendment that I did on the contract this time around was I gave them the whole script in one go, because it just was going to help to speed up the process. And they told me that the ending of book 2 actually made them quite emotional. So that to me is pretty cool. So
okay,
I'm quite, the second one. It's no secret. I've said it on streams before, but the second one is going to end with the speech to the great dictator,
okay,
and the way that we've got the imagery synced around the words. because this is why I say that I'm really lucky, and I know how lucky I am with this book, because the speech for the great dictator has got its own copyright, and you normally have to apply for it separately, because
Oh, wow.
people have used it in, openings of big gigs and all this stuff. But for me, they didn't even ask me to write a separate letter asking for the rights to the speech. They just let me have it in the rights to the book, because they understood it was an integral part of what the book was going to be. Now, really, the reason I say it's amazing working with them is because they could have very easily charged me extra for that. They could have easily whacked another percentage on. They didn't,
Oh, okay.
and they're fantastic. I'm in the process at the moment of negotiating with them when the books are going to go into you sort of different shops and things, and they're rebranding their websites at the moment, meaning that when it's all rebranded, there will be links to book one on their official website, and there'll also be a link to the crowdfunder on there as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, did you like overprint so you could like sell some to the Chaplain State, and they could sell it at like museums or you know I don't even know where, like a Chaplain memorabilia store and things like that.
Well, they've got a museum in Switzerland, and they do have a
Okay.
massive gift shop in there, because he lived in Switzerland for the remainder of his life once he left America. Um, I'm a stickler for doing things right. So the answer to your question, did I overprint so that I could sell them in the shops? My answer to that is no. And
Oh,
the reason my answer to that is no is I don't believe that overprinting with crowdfunders' money, the profit from crowdfunders' money, to then sell them on in another venue, as in actually purposefully overprinting. I did have extras and I have done things with them, but I mean purposely overprinting so that I can sell them elsewhere, as in take them to another retailer. I don't think that's fair. I'll be
okay.
printing.
Oh,
I
good
will
for
be
you.
coming to. I will be coming to some sort of other agreement with them. It may be this time round. I mean, I don't ever mind discussing this stuff because I've never made it secret, and they haven't either. But they get a percentage from the crowdfunder.
I imagine so. It's yeah.
Yeah, but I think the when we go the other route where they actually have the books, I think the way we're going is I then get the percentage. So when they're sold in their stores, I then get the percentage.
Well,
So it's
good.
the other way around. So that's why they will probably be doing the printing and all the other bits and pieces. But um, I did have a few left over, which I took to a the slapstick festival, and then I had a load, which is another thing that's really important to think about with crowdfunding, is you do have to overprint to an extent, because a lot of the time you will get ones at the very top and the very bottom of the box which are damaged,
Okay.
which
Yes. Yes.
you can't possibly set. And that, it doesn't matter how you try to avoid it, there will always be the
Yeah.
way that they'll wrap them and whatever. It was Eric Weathers that told me to do that. So again, someone else that's given me advice. Um, all the damaged ones, I bagged and boarded them with the excess posters that I had and prints, and I took them into my school and gave them to anybody that wanted one. And I put a load in the library as well. So
Oh,
all the
that's cool.
damaged ones, and some of them weren't even that damaged. It was maybe the top corners were bent, but they were not of quality that you'd send out to a backer.
Right. Yeah. Somebody would get upset. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
definitely not
so
worth it.
you brought up a topic I wanted to ask you about it, if you're okay to talk about, is the comics gate. You know,
Yeah.
my friend Pete is all new to this. So he just asked me, what is this thing about comics gate? So I actually had to call him up on the phone. I didn't want to talk through Messenger, and I explained comics gate. But you're right there in the midst of it. So would you mind bringing us up to speed? I mean, I already know, but I'm talking about for people who have no idea what's going on.
Um, well, for me, the thing is, CG is very much something different to a lot of different people.
Exactly.
The ultimately, if someone was to ask me to define it, and as meat and, like, as nuts and bolts, meat and bones that I could do, I would say it is a pushback to the shift in mainstream popular culture that has been trying to over politicize um, predominantly male areas of interest in an aggressive, often quite left wing way, is how I would probably state it. And I'd say that CG and other communities like it are pushbacks to these, bastardization, if you like, of these, often quite traditional and institutional things that we've all grown to love and appreciate. And you know, I think that people will disagree with that, or with
Of
that
course. Yeah.
interpretation. But for me, it was very much of, we were we were pushing back against things that people were changing that didn't need to be changed.
Okay.
You know, there's no need to do. I mean, I've been pretty much all my life, one way or another, in male dominated environments, and it's never once bothered me. And I've never once gone into a male dominated environment and instantly wanted to even be noticed for being a woman, that the men around me have got to make certain allowances for me. And because my attitude has always been, I've come into your environment, why should I kick the door down and that you have to pander to me? So, and then when I say that, like I've spoke to you before, I love my football. I've got a season ticket at my favourite club. When I started going years and years ago, I was surrounded by men. I never once was like, "Oh, you can't swear around me because I'm a woman," or "You've got to like let me sit there because I'm cold." All these stupid, ridiculous things. I never did any of that. I was like, right, this is a male-dominated sport. There are men here. If I don't want to look like an idiot, I'm just going to have to muck in with the boys, but the problem is, too many times people are coming into these hobbies, instead of just appreciating them for what they are, enjoying
Yeah.
them and going along with the flow, they're
Yeah. I
trying
love
to
this hobby. Now
change.
change it.
Yeah, it's exactly that, and that's what I can't stand, because, you know, and also this weird distortion of pop culture history. I saw it last week where someone was saying, "Oh, they're rebooting." I mean, the other thing that I loved, and I've always loved all my life, is the X-Files. That's like probably my
Okay.
other thing that I love. And now they're talking about rebooting it to make it more diverse. And
Yeah.
I'm
Or
going,
rebooted for a modern audience. There cannot be more scarier words than that.
well, there's no need. There's no need. For one, I mean, I remember saying to my mum, actually about 10 years ago, we were talking about something came up on the TV of like like the 90s to 2000s. So when I was like in secondary school, so high school. And I remember saying to her, when all the other girls wanted to be like Britney Spears, I wanted to be like Dana Scully, right? And I'm not alone in that. And I feel like she was a strong, powerful woman
Yeah.
who held her own against a strong male character. They were a great team. They were
Yeah.
equal. There was so much that was, the story writing was amazing. They didn't need to, I mean, and they had some pretty hard, heavy going bits going on in some of those episodes, that there
Yeah.
was like, um they don't need to remake it. It holds up now. I've recently just watched the Blu-ray box set from start to finish. All right, there are some dud ones in there, and you can expect that. But at
Yeah.
the end, it's still the most. It still holds up incredibly. Why do you want to play around with it? When I loved Star Wars when I was younger, but I didn't love Star Wars for the same things my husband loved Star Wars for. I loved Star Wars because I thought the Ewoks were cute, Princess Leia was cool, and I fancied Han Solo. It wasn't a case of I wanted to wield a lightsaber and be stronger than any single man out there. You know, it's like I was watching the latest clips from the latest Star Wars celebration, and all this thing about, you know, strong, powerful women and women going to rule the universe. And I'm thinking, what are you? It's
Yeah.
absolutely, it's
When
mind
I saw all
blowing
that
to
Force
me.
female stuff, I just felt like, "Whoa, you don't want me as a fan." Okay. I may be a jerk, but I'm not going to be the kind of jerk that goes where I'm not wanted. If you're making it expressly clear that this isn't for me, I'm fine with it. I still love the first three Star Wars movies. You want to make movies for other people, go ahead, but don't expect me to give money for it. So
The problem that Disney Star Wars has done, in my humble opinion, and I'm not a Star Wars expert, I would leave that to Anna and Ethan. But for
yeah,
me, the thing for me is from an semi outsider looking in, because I love the franchise, but I'm not a mega fan. They should have done what Marvel did before Marvel got taken over by Disney. Marvel had various different branches of their comics with various different forms of Peter Parker, various different forms of Wolverine, various different forms of all these other characters, various different story arcs. If you didn't like one particular Spider-Man or you didn't like one particular story arc of one of the characters, you didn't read it. You went back to read the ones you wanted, and that was that. But the problem with what Disney Star Wars has done and Disney Marvel has done is they have made theirs and only their versions canon, meaning that everything else now, according to them, doesn't exist. Do you know the amount of Star Wars books and comics that they've said are
yeah.
now
A lot
now
of
not
Star Wars
canon?
fans are mad about this expanded universe just being dropped. Yeah, I've been hearing about that for a couple of years now. People are upset.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, if they actually kept it that way, the irony is they're going on about diversity all the time. If they'd actually kept it that way, they would have actually hit true diversity because they would have had a story for everybody. But the reason that they don't want to do that is because they don't want diversity; they want control. And this
They
is
want
what I can't
conformity.
stand about it.
Like everybody seemed to like the Cara Dune, and then that actress got kicked off because she didn't toe the party line. It's ridiculous.
But nothing she said was historically inaccurate. This
Right?
is what
She
annoys
quoted
me.
somebody else. She quoted a famous line. I actually had like a little argument with one of my friends. I'm like, you're being very disingenuous about what she said. What she said was like 10 years ago would have been championed, but can't diverge for a split second from what the
There
party
is
wants.
a Jewish writer called Daniel Goldhagen.
Oh,
So,
more.
so bear in mind about this. Goldhagen, he's a Jewish writer. His book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, was banned for years because he said in there that Jews themselves used to help the Nazis because they were removing their own like business rivals. That they
Yeah,
actually and they also believed that if they shopped other Jews, they'd save themselves. And
yep,
that's where that poem also comes from, the one about when they were taking the communists. I didn't pay attention because I wasn't a communist.
yep, yep, yep.
And that book was banned in Israel, and it was that he wasn't allowed to release it because they said it was basically too out there. And then loads of other stuff has come out, and they had to relinquish that, and they had to relent, and they had to go, okay, it's right, we can
Yep,
release
yep.
it.
Historical
So
fact. Yeah,
it's historical fact. It's an uncomfortable truth. Look, I'm like I
right,
said to you, my mum's Jewish.
right.
I am, and I will be. I'm telling you now. Anyone can go through my Twitter and they'll see it. Anytime anyone says any anti-Semitic rubbish, I am on them like a ton of bricks because I can't stand anti-Semitism, and I personally think anti-Semitism is never gone away. It's one of the most vile things in the world. And actually, when people start claiming other social injustices, they are ignoring that they're doing that to deflect from the fact that the bigger problem is something they're too scared to address because actually there are a lot of anti-Semitic people out there.
Oh yeah,
And
yep.
and it's to me it's really bizarre. But yeah, Joe Froggo said she did quote a line from the Holocaust Museum.
Yes, she
And
did. Yeah, that's why I found it to be so ridiculous that she, you know, uh, I'm getting myself mad.
no, you're right. But the thing is as well, what people don't stop to realise is now if Disney had said in this instance, we just didn't want anyone being political. She worked for the House of Mouse at the end of the day,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah,
Then I
I
would
said
have thought,
I can't spout off my politics at work. I'm
then
at
I
work.
would have said, okay, fair enough. I understand why they sacked her. However, Pedro Pascal went on a rant about something only a month before that was worse than what she said, and they totally ignored it. They
Right.
have been politicizing their stuff now covertly for at least 10 years that they have been indoctrinating into slowly, and that was the thing that hit it. No, the thing that hit it was the people that she was mixing with, they didn't want her mixing with. So for example, she was getting a lot more in with the fandom menace people, and
Right.
she was getting noticed by Star Wars. They hate Star Wars Theory. Star Wars Theory's YouTube channel's got more, I think, than theirs has. There's been all these little things that it's because of who she was mixing with, and it's
Yep. I
because of,
agree.
and it's the association. Now, as far as I knew, when I was brought up, I was told that guilt by association was something the Nazis did. Yet the other side is now using that, but we get called the Nazis.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's it's totally and utterly bizarre to me. And what I find so bizarre about the whole situation is I quote from history. I look at history, and the amount of times I've been blocked on Twitter when I come back at someone with something that's historically accurate, and I'm not doing anything but saying it's historically accurate.
Yep. Yep. That's one of my pet peeves. I have a history degree myself, so I'll pontificate about history way too long with some people. So if you block me because I'm boring you, that's one thing. But I know my history, and people get mad at me when I'm like, no, that's not what happened.
No,
Yeah.
it's totally it's 100% the way that it is. They hate it when you know more than they do. I'll give you a great example.
Sure.
So we had a group come into my school not that long ago, and they were trying to diversify our curriculum, which of course made us sit there and go, "Oh God, here we go." And they stood up in front of the entire of the children weren't in. It was a training day for staff,
Okay.
and they're going through this
I'll tell
stuff,
you a funny story about my very first teachers conference meeting.
and they stood up and they went, "Well, now there's actual proof that the ancient Egyptians were black." And I'm sitting there, I'm going, "Well, I must have missed that email because, as far as I know, there's no proof of that."
Right.
So anyway, and then they're going on and on about this stuff. And then I put my hand up and I said, "Can I ask a question?" And I saw my boss go, "Oh God, no."
Here it comes. Here it comes.
And then
I got that look from my principal plenty of times.
and then they were going, "Yeah, sure. What do you want to ask?" I said, "So, are you now saying that the ancient Egyptians were black? Are you sticking to that line? Is that your historical argument that you're going to go? Is this the hill you're going to die on, basically?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Yes, yes." Da, da, da. I went, "Okay, I'd like an apology then." And they went, what do you mean?" I went, "Because if you are now going with the line that the ancient Egyptians were black, you then have to also acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that comes with that. The ancient Egyptians enslaved the Jews. So
Right.
therefore you are saying that the first people were actually enslaved with the Jews by a black civilization. So where's my apology?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't say anything
History
to me.
is an uncomfortable thing.
Well, and the thing is, I would never have come out with something that flippant
Right.
if I hadn't have had an untruth thrust upon me. The problem that is going on now, and I made a tweet about it last week about TikTok and all these social media things, is that there's too much short snippets of wrong information. And if you're not teaching children the correct ways to analyze stuff, you're going to find yourself in a situation where they're not going to know what is real and what is propaganda and what is totally fake.
I said that when I was a teacher. I said I was taking my classes to become a teacher, and I remember I said we're trying to teach kids to think, not what to think. I said we're falling in this problem where we're giving these kids conclusions and then regurgitate the conclusion, and the whole class looked at me like I said something foreign. I said, history, like, I took a lot of history classes, and I had a lot of good history teachers that were like, "Oh yeah, that's a different way to look at it." That basically meant I disagree with you, but they were professional.
Mhm.
How many times do we just say, "Okay, kid, here is this information. Open up your mouth, regurgitate it to me." We got to teach kids critical thinking. We don't teach kids critical thinking. You know,
Nope.
I could go on and on and on about teachers, like, and then they graduated 12th grade. They still can't even make change.
Well, we were having a conversation. They're talking about overhauling examination years in our history courses over here. So we have something when they hit 16 called the GCSEs, and
Okay.
that's the course that takes them on to be able to do college level, and they have to get the equivalent of 6 C's and above of 9 courses to be able to do this.
Okay.
And we were talking about, just we were just generally having a chat going, what do you think the government will do next about history? And then I turned around and said to my boss, I said, you know what? I'd scrap an examination for history. And he went to me, why would you do that? I went, because what we're doing with these kids is we're just getting them to regurgitate facts purely for a test. They're not putting into the context of the real world. If you become a historian, you don't sit an exam. When I did my degree at university, I never sat an exam. I did a dissertation at the end. You do a massive research piece, that's what you're graded on. I don't know a single historian that will tell you that they've got an examination to do. They might have a deadline to meet, but that's a very different thing. So I think that for history, they should scrap it. They should get them critically thinking. They should get them researching. They should get them understanding what it's like to independently work. And they should be assessed on a piece of coursework or a big project at the
Yep.
end of 2
I
years.
agree. When I became a construction worker and I was teaching electrical theory for a couple of years, and I used to tell the students, bring your book. I don't care if you bring your textbook. The world is an open book test. But I said, if I'm going to give you a test where it's just A, B, C, D, as as an electrician, that's a poor test. I want to put tools in your hand, give you a piece of equipment, and get it to work without it exploding. And yeah, you can have a textbook, because do you think an architect just sits in a room with just pencils and paper? He's got computers, he's got everything to help him design a building. And when I go to work, if I don't understand something, I call somebody, I talk to my partner, I talk to my foreman. So I think this whole like taking a test to learn a fact is I think it's just easy for the teachers to do, and that's why we do it. But I agree with you. I think like every test should be, it shouldn't be it should be an open book test, because it's like, explain to me the meaning of the French Revolution and why it's important to you. You can have your book, but it's not going to tell you that. That's conclusions that you're going to have to draw. So I agree with you 100%.
Oh, exactly.
But if they're going to overdo the English education, are they going to do away with the owls?
The owls?
Yeah, the Harry Potter test.
Oh God, yeah. Weirdly enough, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of, isn't there? There's all this stuff about the Harry Potter books, and I remember growing up, and the Harry Potter books weren't out when I was a kid, but they were out when my brother was younger, and he's 10 years younger than me, so they were the big thing. And I
Okay.
remember there being kids in my brother's class actually whose parents were really strict Christians, and they saw I don't mean cultish or anything like that. I mean, they were just very devout Christians. That was what they lived by the Bible, they lived by the Lord, and that was fair play to them. But they wouldn't allow their children to read those books. They actually
yeah, it's about witches and warlocks.
Yeah, it was one of the books that was actually read in one of the year groups. It was the book the whole class had to read, and they actually homeschooled them for the term when they had to read that, because they said, no, it's about witches and wizardry and it's satanic, and therefore we don't agree with it. And that's always stuck in my head
Yeah.
about the Harry Potter books actually.
Well, it seems silly in retrospect, but when it first comes out, you don't know.
Yeah.
Especially when you hear in terms about witch, warlock, and Death Eater. So it's easy to make fun of right now, but I could see the point in the beginning. Right now, Harry Potter is about witchcraft and magic, the way Star Wars is about science. The wands might as well be lightsabers.
Someone actually said to me, Harry Potter is just Star Wars with broomsticks.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah,
it is, and they're all rip-offs of the Bible, one way or another.
Yeah, it's all the classic hero's journey.
Yeah.
I'm a big Harry Potter fan. My wife's a big Harry Potter fan. I'm very nervous about this new HBO show. Please, please don't wokeify it or modern audienceify it.
I haven't heard about this. What's this new HBO show?
Oh, you don't know? Okay. I just assumed everybody in England like hangs out with the Beatles and J.K. Rowling and everything. But they want HBO Max wants to, HBO Max is hurting and they need a big hit. So they approached J.K. Rowling with, they want to do 7 seasons of Harry Potter, one season per book, which I think is a great way to do it. And they tried to buy out the rights just outright. And then she was like, nope. And then they were trying to compromise with her. They wanted to set it in America, which I'm even as an American, I don't want Harry. Let the English have Harry Potter. So now she agreed, but she's in control of the show. So I'm hoping that she's very protective of the books, as she should be, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. But I'm also very very nervous at the same time.
It's going to be. I mean, I'm quite. Now you've explained that, I quite like the idea in the fact that I do think those films do miss a lot of what is
Right.
in the books out.
I'm a big fan of the books, and I tolerate the movies.
Well, yeah, I think the thing is, it depends what order you see it in, doesn't it? If you see the films first and then you read the books, you
Well,
don't really mind the films. But I think if you read the books, you tolerate the films. Like you said, it's like my mother-in-law. She's read all of those books. I can't even tell you how many times because she reads so fast. She will literally read the whole set of them in a week because
oh,
she just
wow.
yeah, she's a mad reader. She loves them, absolutely loves them, and she says like they're so submersive. That's why she really loves them.
They're
But
great books. I take it you haven't read the books.
no, I have read the books.
Oh, you have read the books. Yeah,
Mhm.
I read the books first. The first movie came out when I was a teacher, and so I didn't know what this was, and I just saw all the kids were talking about it, and I felt it was my duty to read the book, and I fell in love with it. I thought it was really good. I To the point when the last book came out, my wife and I were like, "It's coming out! It's coming!" Like I think we took off work and sat there and read it. We were we weren't living together at the time. We were still dating, and we were like, she's calling me up because I'm a slow reader, and she read it fast. She's like, "Come on, hurry up!" You know.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Excuse
remember
me.
it came out over here, and the bookshops were open at midnight, and the
There was
queues
lines
for
around
them
the
was
block.
mental. Yeah, I remember that. The queues were absolutely mental.
And just like I said, comic books got me to read. I had students that said that they owe it all to Harry Potter. That's the fact that they could read. So I'll always have a soft spot for it.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you. I'm kind of fascinated with English architecture, and
Mm.
I've been reading. Uh, uh, why can't I think of the name of the book? But it's Alan Moore, the comic book writer. He did a book about Jack the Ripper, and
Oh,
half
from hell.
From Hell. Yes, thank you. I just got the books, reproved, and then all of a sudden I blanked. But the Johnny Depp movie was all right. It was different, but the books itself, the comics itself, spent about half of the pages talking about the architecture of London and the
Mm.
and the Nicholas Hawksmoor, the architect. Do you know anything about this?
Not massively about the
Okay.
architecture, but I think if I remember rightly, um, the reason why Alan Moore references the architecture a lot is it's to do with the Masons because
Right. Right.
don't they call God the great architect?
Right, right, and that was his point to the book, was he was trying to tie it all to the Masons and everything like
Mm.
that. I don't know, because then I read other people that dismissed him, and then I read other people that said it was that artist William Seabird or what. So I don't know, but I'm still fascinated with
Walter
architects.
Walter Stickert. Yeah,
Yes, Sick. I
interestingly,
said the name wrong. Yes.
he said he made the connection about Walter Sickert about 20 years before Patricia Cornwall, the crime writer, believed that it was Walter Sickert.
Oh,
Um, and it was a very she's a bit mad though. She bought from what I remember, she bought some £2 million Walter Sickert painting because she believed that it was evidence that he was Jack the Ripper, and she actually got bits of it cut off and had the
ooh,
DNA tested, and it came back inconclusive. So there's a book that she wrote called Portrait of a Killer, and
yeah,
it actually talks about Jack the Ripper. But um, there's a really good book about Jack the Ripper called Five, and it's
5.
actually yeah, it's a history book, but
Okay,
it actually talks about the Jack the Ripper case from a different perspective. It doesn't talk about the notoriety of the killer. It talks about the five women, the canonical murders, and it
okay,
actually says what you stop concentrating on the killer as a person, because we don't know really anything about them other than what is like glorified or romanticized in,
Right.
or is infamous in pop culture. What you've actually got to stop and ask yourself is two things. What were the living conditions like that these women had to turn to these professions that ultimately got them killed? And what was the social and political environments that these people were in, which meant that this class structure, I mean, Britain was at the height of the empire.
Right.
London was almost the center of the world. How is it that children, 1 in 3 children died under the age of 5,
Right.
and one in 10 women were murdered for either domestic abuse or prostitution? The after effects of prostitution, whether that's some sort of sexually transmitted disease, or it's because they drank themselves to death, or
Right.
they starved, or they froze to death, or all these different things. There was no welfare state. And it's such an interesting book because you actually realize that for over the last 100 years we've been asking the wrong questions.
All right. 5. I got to check that out. I,
Hmm.
I, I got to read. I'm kind of fascinated with that. Like, I'm an American history guy. Like, I've been reading a lot about the original British colonies, and
Mm.
what was it? Jamestown was the first one, and
Hmm.
they said 3 out of 5 people that came to Jamestown died.
Yeah.
So
Well,
why did they come? That's to me one of the things that we don't really talk about in American history. We just talk, George Washington, which is important, but what was the living conditions of the average person in Britain at the time that people were willing to come? Because I don't think it was a secret. People knew that it was going to be rough and harsh. You know, three out of 5 people died within a year or two coming to the colonies. I don't know. I could talk to you history all night long.
Well, I'll tell you something that I really want to look into a bit further
Sure.
is that I was thinking the other day about the fact that um, Elizabeth I, so after the Reformation here, there was, Elizabeth I had the Catholics that she had to deal with. But aside from the Protestants, there was this sort of devout sect that was coming up, the Puritans,
Right.
that were causing her as much hassle as the Catholics because they wanted a real hard line for like form of Protestantism, whereas the Catholics wanted no Protestantism in the country at all.
Right.
So, as a way to appease the situation,
Kick,
she
kick them out. Come over
she,
here.
she sent them to America. Well,
Right.
Virginia is named after Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen,
Right. Right. People
and
always talk about Australia. It was founded by as a penal colony, but we forget that America was founded by the people kicked out. The religious
this is what
fanatics and the troublemakers.
But this is what I'm really fascinated about. So in Australia, we saw with like their COVID restrictions and other things that they do over there. I mean, it's really hard for you to get in there and get, permanent residency. And in America, you are still such in many states of your country so deeply religious, and religion governs a lot of the laws that gets passed. And I'm really fascinated to find out, is the reason why Australia is so authoritarian with some things, and the reason America, as forward thinking as America is and a superpower, the reason they hold on to their deep rooted Christianity, is it because at one time Australia was a prison, and one point America was the place we sent our religious nutcases, if you like? Not that I'm
Yeah.
saying people are religious nutcases now, but we did. Elizabeth I sent the Puritans there because she didn't want to deal with them.
Right. And didn't Oliver Cromwell send all the Irish to America? Basically as slaves to get rid of Catholicism. So we were the religious outcasts. That's
So
you know
I'm just curious
yeah.
if this is where these like underlining things in,
Oh, definitely.
there's so much about culture that you just take for granted, you don't ever question it because it's just always been that way. And so I suppose what I'm getting at here is you can blame all your problems on us if you want. Um, so it was Australian.
Don't all kids blame their parents?
That's a great quote. I love that. But
Oh,
yeah.
and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, because my wife was very fascinated with you, that you waited online to get into a service for the Queen's memorial service.
Well, I didn't get into a funeral. I got into, so when she died, you have a period of mourning where they lay in state. So the coffin's not open or anything. You can't see anything, but you can walk past the coffin and pay your respects.
Right.
Well, very typical English, because we love a queue. There was a queue to do that, and because I used to work at the Tower of London and she was technically
Oh,
my boss.
oh, okay. I didn't, because you had some sort of uniform on, right?
Yeah, well, I did in the picture that I uploaded on Twitter. Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
was the uniform I used to wear when I used to work at the Tower of London, and
Okay.
I
Okay.
worked with conservation education. So one of the
I
things
didn't
I
know
did a
that.
lot of work with was the crown jewels. So the yeomen and the guard, also known as the beefeaters, they were the ones that were guarding her coffin that you saw stood round the coffin.
Yes.
And on top of the coffin was the crown jewels. So I had this overwhelming sense that I had to go and I had to pay my respects, not only because she was the queen, but I felt a very deep connection because of what I had done, and like where I'd worked and stuff. And
Yeah.
so I went down there with my family, and my mum has got something called Crohn's disease, which is a digestive disorder.
Yeah. My
And
father had.
you were when the queue at this point, you had to, like, there was a YouTube channel that was just giving update information of the queue, and we got down there and they said, like, it's the queue shutting off, and I was
Hmm.
like, oh, you're joking. The queue had stretched back 7 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. So one of my friends had said to me, why are you queuing in the regular queue with your mum? And I went, because everybody queues in the queue. She went, your mum's ill? And I said, but my mum wants to be here. And then she said, yes, but your mum's technically classed as being able to go in the disability line. I
Hmm.
went, there's a disability line?
Hmm.
And then they went, yeah, there's a. So anyway, we took my mum there, and we were going to go back and join the regular queue. They let her in because by this time her legs were going and she was having real trouble with her
Oh.
knees because my mum's a very sprightly woman, I might add, and she doesn't even look like she's ill. So she was stood there going, I feel like I'm a fraud. Like, well, they were
Yeah, I can
making.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's really not one of these people that likes that stuff. But they went, no, look, you do have this illness. You've proved to us you do. She didn't even have to show them proof, but she did, bless her. And they was like, you can stay here. So we were going to go back and join the queue. And then they went, you can stay as well. We was like, can we? So they put us in this room with a load of other people where there was like a tea and coffee facilities and toilet facilities, and they had blankets and things. The only difference was you still had to queue and wait. But the difference was you ended up getting like a little card where they told you what time you was going in.
Okay.
So we were still there for 9 hours though.
Oh.
We were still there for 9 hours.
Yeah. 9 hours though with coffee, cake, and a toilet is different.
Very much so. But to be honest with you, she kept on saying, "Oh no, I'm going to go and queue because I feel like." I was like, "No, they've told you you're fine, Mum. Just
Yeah,
sit
I can
down."
understand that. That's a different generational thing. My father wouldn't ask for help. My mother wouldn't ask for help either. That's
No.
just the way the older generation is.
So we went. It was the most surreal experience. We actually ended up coming around this corner. You went, so we left this room, and then you walk along, and you join another part of the queue, which was still another hour wait. But you went along the bridge, and by this time, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
and the sun was coming up, and it was the most surreal thing, like seeing the sun come up over the Thames. And then we ended up going into this room where it was like the security they'd put on was like going through the airport, but
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
but
imagine.
but like 10 times worse. So we've gone through this, and this is, so they went down our bags, and anything that was a liquid, anything at all, they were like binning it. And they were like, you can't have that, you can't. The only thing you could have was medication. Couldn't have any food on you, any drinks on you. So anything you had to get rid of.
Yeah, I
And
imagine.
my husband's got one of the like vape things you have the cartridges in. They took
Yeah.
his vape cartridges. They were like, nope. But the thing him and my mum were the most annoyed about was they took their donuts. And they were like,
Did they eat them in front of you?
so I was like, so you're going to miss the opportunity of paying respect to your queen because you're giving up your donuts. I was like, obviously not, but we just wanted our donuts. So anyway, we went through that, and then it was so weird because you had all this anticipation. You saw all these police with guns, and you had all this and then all of a sudden you just went round this corner in this room, and there she was. It was total silence on this plinth in this coffin, draped in her standard, with the yeoman warders around, like as she was like laying in state. They were the ones guarding, and
And
I remember.
you could see her. It wasn't a closed box. You could
No,
see
it
her.
wasn't closed. Yeah, it was closed. And I just looked around at my mum, and she looked at me, and we both had tears in our eyes because it was the most bizarre. It, it was the strangest thing because obviously on the news, they had been showing the coming and going of this, and obviously her children and grandchildren had also done their vigil part and taken over and doing that. So that was all over the news. So then to get into this room, it was so weird. It felt like you'd walked onto a film set,
Yeah.
or you'd walked into a postcard where it was looked exactly the same as you'd only seen a couple of hours before. And you can't stop. You're told you have to keep walking, which is
Oh,
fine.
okay. And forgive me for being American, but what was the building that you were in? I don't even know.
Westminster Palace.
Oh, Westminster Palace. Okay.
Yeah. So you sort it's sort of connected to the Houses of Parliament.
Okay.
So
My
you
wife
went.
is listening, getting emotional now. My wife is Canadian, and she has great respect and affinity for the Queen. She was waking up in the middle of the night to watch all the news and everything. So I told her about how you were going to go and pay respect for the Queen, and that's why she reached out and started speaking to you on Twitter.
Oh no, that's
So
what I mean.
she's sitting right behind. She's not on camera, but she's sitting over here with tears in her eyes, listening to your story.
It was incredibly. It was so bizarre I mean, I remember I was at work, and one of my best friends, she actually works in before Charles became king. He had a private house, and it was, when I say it's a private house, when he's not there, it's open to the public. And
Oh, okay.
one of my best friends does guided tours around there, and she actually messaged me and went, something weird's going on. And I went, what do you mean? She went, because Charles has just run out of here and jumped in a car. And I went, that's interesting. And then I put the news on while at work while I was doing some marking. It was the end of the day, and it was coming up about that she was ill. And thing is, I've worked in and around government institutions for over 10 years now. So I know a lot of people in where I used to work at the Tower. I'm still friends with a lot of the yeoman warders. I know people that have worked, that are quite high serving in the army and all these sorts of things. So you start listening to the language of the way that they're saying things, and you know
Oh,
that the
so you know.
situation is not now. Nobody really sticks to this. It's an old tradition rather than a law now. But to speak about the death of a monarch is treason. Like it's you wouldn't be executed for it now, but in the old days it was considered to be something that you could definitely end up on the chopping
Okay.
block for. But the traditional value of that now is that for bad practice, people don't do that because it's just not seen to be a nice thing, not professional. I started to notice, I was watching Sky News, they all were suddenly in black. And I
Okay.
was like, and then other things like she, so people don't know this because it's not a massively known thing. This is no secret or anything. It's just one of those things that doesn't really make the news for whatever reason. But when a monarch hits a certain age, their coffin is kept in the basement of Westminster Abbey. Is the
Wow.
idea that if anything happens, it is ready to go. It's a morbid thing to think of, but they do.
Like she picked it out herself.
Yeah, she picked her own coffin and
You
she
know,
designed it, and it was, and she the story that I was hearing from people that I knew was,
unfortunately, that's life. You know.
yeah, well, it's true. And that the story that I'd heard was that her chief undertaker at Balmoral had sent a message to London asking for the coffin to go, and it went on an RAF jet apparently to
Okay.
Balmoral. But of course, at this stage, it's all hearsay. Then we started to get emails from in the unforeseen circumstances that Her Majesty the Queen passes away, from institution I'm a member of, this is the procedures that will be happening. You will not be receiving emails from us. Da, 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 da. And again, this is nothing secret. This is if you're a member of a charity or that she was a patron of, this is what you got. And I messaged my friend and I was like, this don't look good. Got home that night and it was still circulating on the news that they didn't really know what had happened. And then all of a sudden, I was looking at my phone, and all of a sudden, of all the places to see it, just goes to show them the world we live in. It was Instagram. The
Wow.
royal family's official Instagram put it up before the news actually got it. And then I remember it cut to the news presenter, and he said like that she died. And I remember the strangest thing, considering that I may have worked for her and I did meet her a couple of times at work, but it wasn't like wasn't like she was, I wasn't on first name terms with her.
Yeah.
I don't think, apart from someone from my own family, I have cried that much. It was so bizarre. Like
my
I
wife is crying right now.
couldn't
Listening
stop
to you.
myself from sobbing, and it was so weird. And I think it's because she's just always been there.
Yes.
Like she'd always
It's
been
a
there.
turning point in British history, I imagine.
Well, my mum is 60. How old's my mum? 67.
Okay.
She said that she's 67. This is the first coronation she's ever going to see.
Right. Right.
It's mental when you think of it that way.
I mean, not to make light of it, but like James Bond is Her Majesty's Secret Service. Like the new James
Yeah.
Bond movie has to have a different title, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's politics, it's culture, it's history.
Well, it's like our Crown Prosecution Service, so the equivalent of like your district attorney's offices and your, all of them were, say, John Smith QC. I know this sounds like a ridiculous thing to say from somebody that knows pretty much a lot of her history and her government. I never stopped to think that QC actually stood for Queen's Counsel.
Oh, okay.
So they've all been called QCs for as long as I can blooming well remember. Now they're all KCs.
Oh, you gotta change your language. Yeah.
It's mental the amount of things.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like hearing God Save the King for the first time, that
Yeah.
was pretty weird, to be honest. I mean,
That's the first time I heard it. I'm American over here. We don't say things like that, but that is weird. God,
yeah, I mean, I went, so
like
the
the
Saturday after.
Sex Pistols. Are the cover bands going to change the songs?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's iconic in itself, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing for me, we went up to London. So I think, what did she die on the Thursday, wasn't it? So Friday was his speech, when his first speech as king, and Saturday we went to London to lay flowers at Buckingham Palace, and I remember seeing, and it really it was the other point that broke me. And when I say it broke me, I mean like the holding back the tears was hard. I don't know if you remember during the Jubilee, she did that thing with Paddington Bear.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
My wife loved that. Yes.
There was on the floor, there was hundreds of either jam or jello sandwiches or marmalade sandwiches.
I remember there was a picture of Paddington like by himself, and it actually got me.
Oh, I
And,
hated that one. Yeah, I've seen that one. No, the
yeah,
one that got
I'm
me.
not a pro or anti queen. You know what I mean? She's just a part of history. And now all of a sudden I see Paddington looking sad, and that got me sad.
No, I tell you, the one that got me was the corgi with no one holding his leash and him just looking really sad.
Oh, I
I was
never
like,
saw that
that's it,
one.
I'm done now. But no.
Elle, did you see that one? Yeah, she she just shook her head and agreed.
And so we was at Buckingham Palace, and I remember seeing there was just hundreds of Paddington Bears, where people had gone and taken little Paddington Bears and put them at the gate. And what I thought was absolutely incredible was, when was it? There was a service that I can't remember what service it was, but there was a was it a carol? I think it was a carol service at Westminster Abbey at Christmas time. And my mum's as bad as me. I can phone her up with anything to do with this, and I'll just set her off. Like she's, So Princess Kate, she asked for all the Paddingtons, and they gave her all the Paddingtons. They assumed that she was going to be sending them to children's hospitals, which she did eventually, but she did something with them first. When the King and Prince William walked into Westminster Abbey, it was on the news. They couldn't believe what she'd done. She'd had all these Paddingtons turned into Christmas tree decorations, and they were hanging in on the tree in Westminster Abbey. And that was. I'm sorry to have set your wife off again if I have. So yeah, that was pretty special. But yeah, the coronation soon, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there.
So let me ask you this now, because now I'm dying to ask. So how do you feel about Harry and Meghan Markle? I think I already know, but
I think that she is an absolute waste of space.
I think she's being very disrespectful.
I think that he is being absolutely disrespectful. But I will say something that people look at me with a raised eyebrow and can't believe that I'm actually saying it. But I think that she is in over her head at the moment, and I don't think she knows which way to turn, because I think it's quite a Californian thing to get on that psychologist couch and divulge all your personal information. And I think she encouraged him to tell his truth. But I don't think she quite realised the floodgates she was going to open.
Yeah.
Have now, there's no filter. He can't stop. And I think even she realises he's going down a path that means that this brand he's trying to build is not going to work. I mean, I think she was all for being this.
I think she thought she was going to be hailed as a hero and didn't expect this negative backlash, even from Americans.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. I mean, I don't, and all this. I think what I hate about
she
it the
looks
most,
like an ungrateful brat, is what she looks like to us.
What I hate about all of this, and this is my biggest gripe with her, is that do not try to tell me that you didn't know who he was before you
Mark is saying hello.
Yeah, hey Mark. Don't tell me you didn't know who she was before you married. He was before you married him.
Don't tell me you didn't know what you were getting into.
No,
like, exactly. To circle back to what we said before, this is somebody who's joining into a culture and then saying, "I love this culture, now change." This is like, I don't know, somebody joining in my Dungeons and Dragons game back in high school and then saying, "Oh, Dungeons and Dragons is great. I always love Dungeons and Dragons. Can we change everything about Dungeons and Dragons? Can we get rid of the dice? Can we get, what are you doing, Megan? You knew this was the British monarchy before you got what you wanted to be a princess, but you didn't want to inconvenience your life, is the way I look at it.
I'll tell you this: I love the royal family, and I'm a big supporter. And I actually, I have constant arguments with people that say how much they cost the British taxpayer, and they don't actually know what
really.
But
do they really cost the British taxpayer, or are they a source of revenue?
They're a source of revenue, a massive source of revenue.
Yeah, that I saw Gon of Card explain that in one of his videos, and I never thought about it. As an American, well, like, oh yeah, they're just taking money, they're just welfare, and then he explained about how they return more money than they take in.
You know how much they cost the British taxpayer a year? Each individual British taxpayer.
How much?
£1.52. You can't even get a Starbucks coffee for that amount of money.
Oh wow! Okay,
that's how much they cost us each individually a year. So it's ridiculous.
It's cheaper than your television tax.
Blooming well, it is. But the thing I don't like about them two is that for a pair that want to disappear, they not have to do a lot to stay around.
Yep.
And also, Mark's gone £1.52. I'd like my money back.
It's like that South Park episode. Respect our privacy,
He is right though. One thing he says, the royals' treatment of Diana was both disgusting and public. No self-respecting person would volunteer to join that family and expecting it. Well, this is the thing. I love the royal family, but I would never marry into them because
no.
I'll tell you this for nothing. When the Queen did come into where I worked, she was incredibly lovely, and so was Prince Philip. But us as members of her royal household, the things we knew we had to do when we were in her presence, the way you have to stand, how you can't turn your back, the way you have to address her. And this is not her putting this in place. This is just an institution.
Right, right.
But it
And
was
she has to play her part too. I imagine the Queen probably had a lot of
yeah.
uncomfortable moments in her life too.
Yeah, and actually the thing is that for the 10-15 minutes that you're in their presence, it is the most stressful 10-15 minutes of your entire year.
Oh God,
Um,
I couldn't even
so
imagine.
so really, in reality, why would anyone want to live that forever?
Not me.
And you know,
I don't want to even be famous. I couldn't even imagine being a movie star. Just the way they live.
and
I'm actually amazed when I find out that like a movie star is well grounded and has a normal life. I couldn't even imagine the Queen and the royal family. Like I had a friend that almost made it big. His band used to open up for No Doubt, and he
mm,
used to come over to our house and we'd be playing Dungeons and Dragons, and he used to be like, "Yeah, I just love hanging out with you guys. Everybody else is sucking up to me. Whatever I say is great and awesome, and you guys are telling me to go f myself." So I couldn't even imagine like how the Queen. They're surrounded by yes men. Is it any wonder Madonna's weird? You know,
well, I think isn't it Ringo Starr? Wasn't it Ringo Starr that all his kids are so grounded because he made them earn their pocket money?
oh really? That
I'm
sounds cool.
sure, because Ringo Starr,
I
Ringo
knew you knew the
Starr's
Beatles. I knew you were friends
yeah,
with the Beatles.
know about them. I'm sure Ringo Starr's son, and I can't remember his name now, but I'm sure at one point he was the drummer for Oasis as well. Like when
Oh
they
really?
yeah, because he's obviously a drummer like his dad, but Ringo Starr's always been quite grounded as well. Like he was the one that sort of didn't buy into a lot of the weird bravado that I think the other three got themselves mixed up with.
It's
Ringo was
hard
always
not
my
to.
favourite anyway.
I imagine it's hard not to.
Mark's trying to wind me up in the chat by going on. Mark, because we've had this conversation many times. The Queen did not pay for Prince Andrew's payoff, so go shut up. He's got he
You
loves.
guys have a history, I take it.
Well, we obviously do our CG UK shows, and we did one on the royal family, and as much as he tried to argue me down, I think it's been the only topic in his life on a stream with someone that he wasn't able to get them to back down and see his point of view
Uh,
because it's not going to happen. But I will say that as much as our personas online are that I am very traditional and he is a communist. One of he is one of my best friends. He's always been one of my best friends.
Isn't that weird? I thought Comicsgate was a hate group. I thought you were supposed to hate everybody. You could
Yeah,
get along with people with different political opinions. That is so bizarre.
do you know what's amazing? We had a meetup in February. Actually, and this is why I say there is so much love in the group. Is that there was a group of us that met up in Bristol when I did my talk at the film festival. They all came down to support me. There was Mark, there was Carl Stefan, obviously there was Jan, my husband, there was Bristolian Dave, there was Mark. And you know what was really mad? We were all sat in a room together and it was exactly like we stream. Like we were all talking exactly like we stream.
Yeah,
And it was absolutely brilliant. And there was no weird silences and there was no strange. It was exactly the way that we always are. The same jokes, the same silliness.
that's
And
great.
the only problem was I couldn't mute him and boot him from a room when he started annoying me. But he doesn't generally. But it was a lot of fun. And
Oh,
he knows that if he wants to try to wind me up, he does the monarchy thing. And if I want to wind him up, I do the communist thing. So
yeah,
it's just what it is.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of
You
fun.
bust your friend's chops. You bust your.
Of course you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it was lovely to actually have these friendships form in the real world away from the internet because you realise, you hate to think that this is all built on not fantasy, but it's all built on the idea of a form of non-reality. So when you
Yeah.
actually because at the end of the day, before we actually met up, we'd been talking for 4 years. And because of COVID, we'd never met before and whatever.
Right.
And then when you actually meet up and you realize that actually everything you've built online is real, I would have no issue like coming to the States and meeting any of the guys I've been talking to
Yeah.
for a
Come
really
on
long
over.
time.
I
Yeah.
just built I just built a game room, and I'm trying to get people. I joke around with all the people that I interviewed. Come on over. We'll have a comic book convention in my basement. We'll play board games. I love to host. I'll make a big pot of chili. You come on over. You and your
Yeah,
husband.
yeah,
My
Mark's just
wife
said
would
this.
talk to you about the Queen all night long. She would love it.
Mark's just said it's 3D now. That's true. It is. We're in
Yes,
3D now.
you're in 3D.
But I definitely am going to have to go very soon
Yes,
because it's
we
2
spoke
o'clock.
a lot. I didn't even realize how long we've been talking, but you were such a pleasure to talk to. I barely had to say anything. It was
Oh, well, I'm
wonderful.
always happy to come back.
And
You're
I was
actually
so
first.
happy. I was almost like starstruck. Like, oh my God, she said yes. I can't believe some of the people that are saying yes to me. And I'm a new guy. I'm starting out, so I'm so happy. I started this channel during COVID because I was tired of the lockups and I wanted to talk to people about comic books. And it was some people were getting really weird, and so I'm so happy. So thank you so much for coming on my small channel. I appreciate it so much.
No, it's fine. And actually, you've just raised a really good point because as I've always, there will be things in any community that go on that you don't necessarily agree with someone's point of view, or
Right.
maybe you don't agree. But the one thing that always keeps me so passionate about what we do and so honest and pure to the group that we formed is that this CG was my lifeline during COVID when I couldn't go anywhere. Like when even I was, as a teacher, I was even working from home. Like we were teaching online. There was no let up. I was constantly indoors, other than if I wanted to go food shopping or I had a walk around the park. That was my life. So
Oh,
the fact that I had all these people either to watch their streams or to talk to them in Hangouts or on Twitter or however, and know that I had real people to touch base with to stop me worrying about my family, to stop me worrying about all these other things. They made it, they made it go a lot quicker.
right.
And it's a
People are social animals. We need to interact.
yeah, and also I will argue with anybody about the apparent hate group that this lot
It's
are
ridiculous.
the thing is, how can a hate group keep you so sane and
Right.
actually keep you? No one was forcing views down my neck 24/7. We know a lot of the time you can. I don't know if Mark's still there. He'll tell you we used to have hangouts on a Sunday. We used to get in like this, but just obviously not live.
Okay.
We we'll talk and talk and talk. We used to talk till like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Be on there for like 5 hours just talking. And I can promise you that only about 50% of that was comic related stuff. Like
Yeah.
we would be talking about everything,
Right.
you know.
Well, how much did we really talk about comic books? You know,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is the thing that people don't they natural human instinct is to destroy what you don't understand. And that's all and at the end of the day, that's what created CG. And in all fairness, that's what will keep building CG because CG is the answer to people trying to destroy things they don't understand.
right.
But equally, they are trying to destroy us because they don't understand that we can exist without them.
And what gets me mad is just yesterday. I don't know. I try to stay out of all the drama, but I'm my own worst enemy. I got drawn into some drama. People were saying Comics Gate's a hate group, and I just kept saying, guys, give me an instance. Give me an instance. What happened? And nobody. Oh, what were they calling me? A sea lion? You're not arguing in good faith. I said, I'm just asking you to back up your claim. Not one person could back up the claim, and now I'm blocked by another 20 people. But whatever. It's ridiculous. People repeating other things that nobody has any proof. And you're a history person. You don't like when people misrepresent history. I'm the same exact way. I just don't understand. Here I am, an American over here, Irish. My grandfather was an IRA guy, and here I am speaking with a British woman who's Muslim and Jewish. You know what I mean? My grandfather, we actually have his wanted poster.
Blimey.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna bring it up when you were talking about, but you know that what do you want? My grandfather came to America to be a cowboy. My Italian grandfather. He didn't realize that there was going to be big cities. And here I am talking with somebody. You're half Turkish. How is this? I like what they say. It's a hat group. I got to get a hat.
Yeah, I mean, and then what I tell you the one that I love always makes me laugh. I used to get it before Reenie turned up, and now poor Reenie, she gets it all, and I'm sure she laughs about it as much as me. So I made no secret of my heritage from the minute I was around here. So I used to get things like, "Oh, you are the token
Yeah, you're the token.
female.
Yeah, I've heard that.
You're the token female foreigner," was what I used to get, and I was like, "You lot didn't even know I was." You know, part of the reason, I would add, part of the reason, and I've not, again, I've said this on loads of streams. Part of the reason why I go by my Charlie's London's always been my tag for the things that I do to do with Chaplin. But the reason everybody knows me as Charlie's London was because when I first came into Comicsgate, and I used to super chat on Ethan streams or anyone's streams, they could never say my real name properly.
Yeah, I
And,
asked. I asked you how to.
and so I was like, oh, stuff this. So I used to that's what I started going by this. So, and what's funny now is like, they all know my real name. They still call me Charlie. They like, it's just weird calling you.
That's your name now. Yeah.
That's my name now. So, and now it's weird for me to hear people call me my real name in the CG because it's like, well, it's not my name around here. But it is, at the end of the day, I laugh at that because 1 minute women don't exist here, and the next minute women do exist.
And then when you prove that they're wrong, they're like, "Oh yeah, well she's just a token." Yeah.
Yeah. So I laugh because I think I actually said it to Rini once. I was like, "Oh, now you're the token girl." I'm sure I said something like that. If not, we were talking about it. But it's just like it's like their textbook. It's how it plays out. Rini's not a token anything. I'm not a token anything.
So talented.
So,
so talented.
So yeah, she's incredible. So it's, to me, I just find it hysterical because it's literally like they're just pulling phrases out of some playbook they have, and that's the end of it.
Yep, just repeating what other people said, and nobody could back up their claims. It's.
No,
I just wanted to ask my favorite story about Queen Elizabeth. I don't know if this is true or not, but I found this to be endearing. Is that somebody invited her to their, like a commoner, just sent her a letter to their invitation to their wedding. Just like, wouldn't it be funny if the Queen showed up and she actually went? Is that a true story? Do you know anything?
I've never ever heard that, but I'll be honest, it wouldn't surprise me.
Right, yeah. And like you see all these pictures of like she's photobombing other people, smiling in the background. It's just endearing.
It wouldn't surprise me because she was very attentive with, there was a there's a is it the Maunday service? I'm sure it was the Maunday service where they have a special bouquet of flowers that is given out. The Queen gives out this like bouquet of flowers that are like I think they've got rosemary and other herbs and things in them, and they're always specifically made by this one florist. And she got very ill during COVID, and the Queen sent her a letter actually saying, I'm so sorry you're unwell. I hope that you're back soon to do some more beautiful flowers for me. And she said, I don't even know how the Queen knew I was unwell because it wasn't like I made a big thing of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I know that there are a lot of other stories like that. I mean, I think that's another thing that made people very sort of anti Harry and Meghan, was because they sort of sat in their beautiful ivory tower in California, complaining about how bad their lives were. But then there was the Queen, who was visiting COVID hospitals, and also she wasn't visiting these wards, she was on. I mean, this is a 90-odd-year-old woman learning how to use Zoom so that she can speak to people, and I just think
just to figure out how to use the StreamYard app.
Well, this is the thing, and then you've got this woman. She's going on she's trying to do her everyday duties while having to be careful because she's vulnerable.
Right.
And she's now having to learn how to use all this new technology. And I just think to myself, and then you've got you two sat at home in your ivory tower, like I say, making out your life so bad.
Right.
I don't know. But anyway.
But I know I've been keeping you way longer than you wanted to. So, but I thank you so much. You were a pleasure. I enjoyed every minute of this. It was so much fun.
No problem. Let's do it again.
Oh, without a doubt. But where can people get your comic?
On Indiegogo. So Charlie's London from Woolworth to Wartime is still live on Indiegogo. If you go to Google, you just type in From Woolworth to Wartime, then you can find it there. You can also, it's pinned on my Twitter page as well, so you'll be able to find it if you want to check it out.
Okay. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
See you later.
See you later, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for coming into the chat, and thank you, Charlie's London, for showing up. This was so great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.